Kalliopee, A Princess's Sacrifice by Koko Nhan. Narrated by Sebastian Grove and Tara Novi.
Prologue. Almost 3,000 years ago, the world as it existed disappeared. The many conflicts between the ancient nations brought chaos to our planet. Men, too blinded by their desire to possess goods that didn't belong to them, ignored the signals that Earth was sending. They were blind to the diseases that decimated the majority of the population, to the climactic upheavals that made life hostile on 90% of the land. Worse, they tested the planet, throwing bombs on its farms, on its cities populated by innocents, which lit up the sky. When humanity realized its mistake, it was too late. Cities were ravaged by fire, epidemics were uncontrollable, and foodstuffs were exhausted. From each continent, only a handful of men remained. They all left, searching for a place to live without fearing the worst. However, refusing to admit their mistakes, the men blamed the women. After all, some of them ruled nations. Someone had to be responsible, and it was out of the question to bear the burden of any guilt. As punishment, women were disenfranchised, scorned, and enslaved. It was under these precepts that the Union of the Five was born several centuries later. Aquaria, people of fishermen and sailors, took advantage of the ocean in the northeast of the continent. Lapizia, a kingdom made rich by its minerals, established its citadel at the foot of the Rocky Mountains. Viridia, for its part, enjoyed green valleys and lakes. Its fertile lands allowed the whole Union to feed itself and provide for its health. Novicia supplied the other four kingdoms with fine woods and game. And finally, there was Libericia, where nomadic people settled according to the seasons. Its citizens were among the hardest workers. They provided an invaluable workforce. But if humanity learns from its mistakes, it ends up forgetting them, at the risk, one day, of repeating them. Chapter 1. Kalliopee.
Don't forget, Kalliopee. There's nothing you're forced to do.
My father's words repeat as I take one last look at my room. Nothing I'm forced to do? Yet, I feel like I must. I turn around and focus on the centerpiece of the tapestry that decorates the walls. A large cherry tree. I carefully scrutinize each of its branches and their tips. I don't forget the smallest blooming flower, all of them dressed in golden leaves. When I need to think, I just lie down on the ground. I always put my head in front of the wall and lie upside down. Like this, the magnificent tree seemed bigger, but more imperfect. I notice more easily the imperfections that characterize it. I no longer see a whole, but every detail, however small. It reassures me. Nothing is perfect. Everything depends on our perspective. The tree's branches reach all the way to the ceiling, which has been painted this time. This continuity gives the impression of being outside the palace walls. I turn away from the tapestry when I've studied every last petal and etched them all into my memory. My four-poster bed sits in the middle of the room. A call to laziness. My nanny struggled fiercely to get me out of it. A smile graces my lips as her voice echoes in my head. You have nothing of a princess. The mattress disappears under a mountain of pillows. It's a cloud on which I often daydream. I detach myself from it to observe my two bookcases overflowing with books and stories, books in which I like to travel. I had always aspired to discover the world. I wanted to visit those countries that were forbidden to me and those forgotten by time or destroyed by wars. My gaze slides to my office, where I used to sit to invent my own stories, tales where, finally, women ruled or, at least, had a central place. The large open windows let in the sense of the early summer to waft in. I close my eyes and take a deep breath, immersing myself in the fragrance to capture it, to never forget it. My chest tightens, and my heart starts to beat fast. I'm at a turning point in my life. I'm about to leave the world I grew up in for one that's unknown to me. While dreading it, I also feel this thrill of excitement at the thought of the adventure that awaits. I'm doing this for myself, but more importantly, for women. It's ironic that I see my marriage as a chance to emancipate us, but if my future husband has remained the same as before, I have hope that our patriarchal world in which wives pay for their husbands' faults will change for the better. A noise behind my back snaps me out of my thoughts. When I turn around, Sienna, my servant, appears in the doorway.
Your Highness, I beg your pardon. I thought you would have come down by now.
With a gentle smile, I reassure her, then after having conscientiously memorized every detail of this decor that I'll probably never see again, I face her. I'm ready, I announce with conviction. I leave my room without a backward glance, followed closely by Sienna. The corridors, contrary to usual, are silent. Today, the palace seems to be in mourning. I leave it to join my future husband. A woman's marriage is rarely good news for her family members because, in a way, she becomes a slave. If single girls have almost the same freedom as men, once we get married, every right we have is taken away. Before that, society sees us as children. We are innocent and fragile. But once we're adults, we become a threat. How do you contain a danger? Just chain it up. Some are lucky enough to be protected by their parents, to remain free, even if rare. And this was also my case until recently. The only right we have is to become mothers, with the hope of having only sons, not only for the sake of inheritance, but also because none of us want our daughters to be enslaved in turn. The word isn't weak. No. Spouses decide for us what we're allowed to do or say. Physical punishment isn't condemned, and our marital duties force us to accept sexual acts, no matter what they are or how they feel. The man takes, and we give without complaint, bowing our heads. And if by misfortune one of us dies under the blows of her husband, he isn't condemned either. Justice doesn't consider this as a murder, but as an accident. I hate this world that hasn't learned anything from its past or its mistakes. Unfortunately, that's not all. By marrying a man, the woman vouches for him. She pays for the crimes he commits. In the books I've read, it's said that women in the past fought for their freedom. They did so with determination and fierceness. Then, 2 millennia ago, the world declined, and someone had to be in charge. Women were judged guilty for our planet's decline. Too greedy, the women led it to its downfall. The ancients blamed them for wars, diseases, and climactic plagues. Women were punished, and their rights were scorned. Little by little, the embers of their rebellion were smothered. Some were executed, and others were imprisoned. Year after year, the uprisings became fewer, the men who supported their cause fewer, and one day, the world was as I know it. Of course, the stories passed down from generation to generation only tell of our faults. They are lies. Only humanity, its stupidity and greed, has led us